Welcome to Say More, a masks off series about identity, reinvention, and what's real when the roles we play start to feel too small. I'm Brooke Lyons, actress, writer, and host of the We Need to Talk About Substack. In each episode, I sit down with artists, thinkers, healers, and entrepreneurs for unscripted conversations about change, creativity, and the quiet courage it takes to live a life off script. This week, I'm excited to welcome Sandra Nelly. She's an astrocartographer, human design expert, and intuitive strategist whose work helps people align with the exact places, energies, and decisions that unlock their highest timeline. She blends deep cosmic insight with grounded, actionable guidance. And today, she's here to map out the intersection of soul, self, and geography. Enjoy. You were saying you grew up in a home where you had relatives who were really into spirituality, and that's how you kind of got into this?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, if you look at my birth chart, it's already in there that I would be passionate in about all things spiritual and especially astrology and travel and all of those things. They're in my birth chart. But yes, early on, my mom and my aunt, they were always fascinated about all things that had to do with spirituality, astrology, crystals, anything like that. So naturally, I started to, my interest got piqued quite early. I started reading books that were just like flying around the house and got really interested in the aspect of astrology to kind of understand people's personalities. And then actually also funny story, and I kind of had like a full circle moment when I started diving deep into astrocartography as a grown-up. I actually had an astrocartography reading when I was a child.
Wow.
Yeah, a friend of my mom's, she was actually doing these back then on paper. And yeah, it was super fascinating. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. But then I didn't really like put two and two together until I really started diving deep. And now, of course, we have like professional software and it's so easy. But yeah, it was really like a full circle moment and kind of like, and I was always fascinated with maps. And as I was saying, like travel, we moved around a lot. I've lived in different countries, grew up with different languages. So I have a big ninth house stellium as well. So definitely, yeah, it's kind of like, it almost feels like it was meant to be for sure.
Which is really interesting too, because I find that in a sort of linear and maybe patriarchal society, or just the way things have been for such a long time,
Mm-hmm.
people who come to this work have a bit of a chip on their shoulder, or a bit of a, you say, I'm into astrocartography, but you have a little bit of a wink around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so beautiful that you grew up in a situation where it was presented as normal, as this is
Yeah.
something real and ancient that
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you can
I
trust.
definitely see that as very special, and yeah, I'm definitely very grateful for that. But yeah, so yeah, I've been obviously using astrology just more like, for my personal use. Again, coming back to like using it for like personality quizzes and things like that, understanding my coworkers, understanding my friends and like that. And then, because I have a background also in the career coaching, I started like implementing that as well. And then, yeah, when I found astrocartography, it kind of like all, came together. And again, I had that like full circle moment and just like, and even today you mentioned I also do human design and I do a lot of other things. So like I bring everything, like all my skills, all my knowledge together holistically and, apply it as needed. So sometimes I'll have people, who come to me and just, want an astrocartography reading, but then we start diving deep into their careers. And then I look at their charts, or they run a business, so that I'll pull up their business chart as well. Obviously human design, like if we can combine both is also great, just because of that knowledge that it can unlock. I have a couple like online courses and master classes, so I also like to incorporate like numerology, for example, and a couple other things. So yeah, so definitely like a very holistic practice here in my end.
That's beautiful, though. I think, sometimes when people are seeking out different modalities or ways to gain clarity about themselves and their life path, it feels very piecemeal when you're only looking at one angle of it. So that's really beautiful that you bring all of those practices together to present a more holistic picture. Because the more I get into this, the more I study it, I realize
each person really is a unique snowflake, and it's important to look at, or a fingerprint, something that unique, and it's important to look at all those aspects.
Yeah, and I also I consider myself to be in the business of knowledge sharing. So I just like to empower everyone to have as much knowledge as possible and look at different sources. And I'm also like a 1-3 profile in human design. So I need that research and that experimentation aspect. So I just like pull everything together. And I also work a lot with zodiacal releasing, for example, which is an ancient sort of technique coming from Hellenistic astrology that essentially like shows that your life is already like timed and your biography is written, and it kind of like shows you the peak periods in your life paired with, for example, transits or secondary progressions. It can just unlock so much additional knowledge. So yeah, I just like to, look at as many different things as possible. Obviously, within a reading of an hour, for example, there's only so many things. And of course I do pre-work, but you could go on and on for days. And especially when it comes to astrocartography, that's also like a very important point. Like when someone books a reading or a report, I ask, what is your like primary goal for travel, relocation, or whatever the purpose is? And then maybe like an optional secondary goal, because we could obviously be looking, and I do look at the whole world, but if you have 7 different goals, and of course it doesn't mean if you say your primary goal is, I don't know, a thriving career, and the secondary goal is finding that place that feels like home. That doesn't mean that you won't find love, or you won't have many friends, or other things won't happen to you. But if we just like start looking at so many different goals, then it will just get really tricky, because there's just so many components to look at. So with astrocartography, we look at the planetary lines, which are like the vertical lines, which people will be most familiar with. But then there's also horizontal lines that are called Paran lines. And then we also look at the relocated charts. So essentially every location changes your personality a bit and changes your birth chart in a way. So you might be, say, a Leo rising in the place of birth, but then you move to a different city and you might be suddenly a Libra rising, for example, and your planets shift into different houses. So those are like the 3 big things we look at. And there's obviously a couple additional techniques as well that can come into play the further you want to dive deep into things.
The relocation piece is super interesting, because I just
absolutely
became familiar with that. And for example, in my birth chart, I'm a Scorpio sun, Scorpio moon, Sagittarius rising, but in Los Angeles, California, where I now live, I'm a Scorpio sun, Scorpio moon, Scorpio rising.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And I was like, wow, that's so intense. But so that's a great explanation. So for those who are not familiar with astrocartography, you just gave a great breakdown. So it's basically astrology, but the astrology of location. And there are the 3 main components, which are the vertical lines, the parens, which are the horizontal lines. And what was the third one you mentioned?
So the planetary lines, or ACG lines, or astrocartography lines, the Paran lines, and then the relocated charts. There are a couple additional things. There's also like a secondary technique called local space. And then, we can look at aspects and midpoints, and then cyclocartography, which is essentially used for timing, where transits and secondary progressions are kind of displayed. And it's, for example, great to plan a move, or where to go for your birthday when you look at an exact date. But yeah, it's very interesting. Relocated chart, it's obviously, there is always a compromise needed when it comes to astrocartography. That's like usually my number 1 disclaimer. There's not going to be a place that's 100% perfect unless you're like super, super lucky. So you might have like a great line, great parens, and then in the relocated chart, there's maybe something that's slightly off, or maybe, not as supportive. And then, or vice versa. The relocated chart could be amazing. Like, for example, you as an actress, you have like a rising sign that's super outgoing, or your career house is like, super, like you have a great stellium there, or, whatever it is. And then, for example, the lines you're on, because you're shooting on location or something like that, might just not be as great as supportive. So you have to go in with like an open mind and just like, be aware that there might be some compromise needed.
I love that. Yeah.
Sorry, not to interrupt, and I wanted just to come back, just to like in simple terms, say astrocartography is essentially taking your birth chart and overlaying it over the world map. And for anyone trying to experiment themselves, we always take your birth chart, and your astrocartography map never changes. So we don't pull that up from the relocated chart, things like that. So it's always your astrocartography map is the same for life, based on your birth chart, which of course is your blueprint for life. But then, as I was saying, as you just mentioned, for example, in LA, you just have a different relocated chart. And you might have noticed also that Scorpio stellium coming through. So I'm very intrigued by that.
It's so intense. I know. People, astrologers meet me and they're like, whoa, go hide under a rock. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That is, and that's all really interesting. And you mentioned something I wanted to ask you about, which is the intersection of a personal astrocartography chart, and then when you're working with clients, integrating their business chart as well. So would you just do the chart of when they started their business?
So there's a couple different ways at it. So especially if it's like a smaller business, or I work with a lot of like solopreneurs or people, that have like a small business. You always want to use your personal chart, your founder chart, as the basis, and especially also for astrocartography. So then I would, for example, look where there are great career lines, or supportive lines where they could be finding clients, or where it would make sense for them to go and, to a conference. But I do definitely in my practice look at business charts as a secondary sort of tool. You can pull that up just if for example, when you registered your business, or when you registered for an Instagram account. So really when you had that idea, or like make a significant like financial investment. So when you had that idea to start your business, I would say when you like kind of launch your website and have the content ready, it's kind of already that second step. So look at the first step when you really when the idea of your business started really like becoming real. And sometimes it's just a matter of like when you feel it was real. So, just go with the flow, but don't try to plan your business to have like a certain rising side, for example, because as the experts will tell you, that's never a good idea.
Oh.
Yeah. So just like, if you have some like old emails, I know sometimes it's hard when the business has been in existence for a long time, but obviously in this day and age, like people usually have some like email in their inbox that they can reference back to really get the exact date and time. And you can pull that up, and it's really great. It shows you, it can give you insights on, who your audience might be, what messaging, what your business is like in the sense of how you make money, what its rising sign is. So there's also really interesting exercises you can do around synastry there. But for astrocartography specifically, I would definitely, unless we're talking obviously about like a huge corporation, then yeah, obviously you would be looking at the business chart. And you will have probably seen also recently a lot of people have also been pulling up birth charts for countries, for example.
That was my next question. Yeah. That's been a really huge thing on the internet. And I know like people, there's a really interesting conversation going on, right, in the community about, let's steer clear of fear mongering, and let's sort of utilize this information to fortify ourselves. And I think something you said earlier was really, dovetailing nicely with that, which is that you can't choose the rising sign of your business. It shouldn't be that way. There's a certain, or you were saying about the balance, right? No place is going to be perfect in astrocartography. And I think that applies to sort of country astrology or world astrocartography as well, where it's sort of like, it's not, well, I'd love your opinion on this, but I've come to this opinion that it's not good or bad. It's just periods of comfortable and maybe uncomfortable, and sort of navigating each one of those with the tools we have at our disposal. So I guess my question to you is how to best utilize this modality to set yourself up for peace or stability when circumstances in sort of country astrocartography feel beyond our control.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously many ways at it without, let's say you're based in LA and you're not looking to relocate. Maybe it's just, but maybe you are just within LA. You can use it, for example, to pick a neighborhood. That's a way. Then obviously for business, it can apply to anyone, but for businesses especially, you don't have to relocate. You can use something called remote activation. So let's say say you have a great line going through Madrid, for example. I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
And you can bring those energies into your life through, for example, eating tapas, learning or speaking the language, reading, I don't know, online magazines from Spain or things like that. I personally watch a lot of vlogs, like travel vlogs from locations where I have great like business and career lines to bring those energies into my life. So that's a way. And then, yeah, of course, like you can use it for travel purposes, even like a getaway. So there's, different ways that you can utilize this.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take that tip. And I mean, I know it's so challenging to break this down into simple terms, but if people were curious, what would be the lines? Like, is it a pretty classic, like, look at your Jupiter line if you want expansion and your Venus line if you want love, or what would be the main
Yeah, so
categories?
that's where it gets a bit tricky because it's very nuanced and there's so many things we look at. So again, as I was saying, the big three of like astrocartography and then a lot of like other little components. And then, the angles, the aspects that certain planets make. Obviously Jupiter, Venus are often, they're obviously the benefics, depending on if you have a day or night chart. So those are good ones. But to say that, if you go to your Venus line, you'll find love, it's not as easy as that. There's so many other things that come into play, especially for like love and relationships. There's also timing that obviously plays a big role. But generally, like, yes, the sun line, you'll be like definitely like shining. And it's a good line, for example, to go for your birthday. But then if you're saying, you want to relax or you're like into, the pretty things in life, then you're definitely like a Venus line could be nice. Moon line could be great. It really, again, depends on the goal. And then also the placements in your chart. And, you might have like a tricky Jupiter placement. So you might be feeling that then as well, even though you're like technically on a good line, if you will. So it's very nuanced, and that's why it's always great to work with an expert. And also a lot of people who talk about astrocartography, for example, on TikTok, you'll hear often that you have to be living on this line to really feel the energies. And it's not like that at all, especially for the vertical lines, the planetary lines. They can be felt up to 700 miles away. So you might be, for example, on a Jupiter line, but then you might also be feeling like a really tricky Pluto line or something because it's also with an orb. It might not be as intense, for example, but most of the time you have a couple lines that come into play, plus your Paran lines, because they can also be felt up to 70 miles. And, they're usually everywhere or most places you have like at least one or multiple Paran lines. There are obviously, ways around this. There are certain areas, again, every individual has a different birth chart and therefore a different astrocartography map. I sometimes work with people that have like basically no Parans in the US, for example. Others have like literally everywhere Parans. So it really depends. But often you'll find that you're also like within the orb of a couple Parans. So that means you might go to a really great Paran line, but you still might be getting some influence of like something maybe that's not as supportive. So that's where, again, it comes back to you have to compromise, and no location is 100% perfect. And then on top, as I was saying, the relocated chart could have also something more challenging or, something to deal with. But, coming back to the fear mongering, what you were saying, I sometimes get people coming to me that say the reader they work with in the past, that reader told them that it's dangerous for them to live in a certain location. My peers and I, we don't see it that way. Like, again, everything in life, it's kind of meant to be and a challenge for a reason. And also on the flip side, sometimes people will come to me and like they feel a pull towards a location. And, we then look at their astrocartography, and sometimes there's an explanation, sometimes there isn't. But really, when there is that pull, then there's definitely a story left to unfold for you. So you should definitely trust your intuition. And if you can, go and explore that, because there might be something for you to learn or experience that, maybe your line doesn't show that it's the best location, or vice versa. I also work with a lot of clients, and I personally know that myself. You have a great line, let's say, for example, on the East Coast of the US. I love New York, but then there's maybe other cities that I don't love that are still on the same line. So there's obviously also those aspects to consider, of course. So, of course, there's also practical matters like, you want to be in a big city or in a small city, access to public transportation, or you have a great line in a country where you cannot work or move to without jumping through hurdles. So that's obviously like another thing. So then maybe remote activation can come into play. And then, sometimes like a move to like a location halfway around the world is just not feasible, or you want to be close to your family. So, there's a lot of just like also practical things to consider.
Yeah, speaking of practical, that was one of my questions. Like,
yeah,
obviously, picking up and moving halfway across the world, I think for the courageous among us and people who have the means to do so, that's fantastic and so inspiring. Now that we live in a world where so much business is digital, it's more possible than ever. But for example, I was dabbling in my own astrocartography, warning people don't do that because, it's not the full story. Like, obviously go to a practitioner who's been trained in astrocartography for the full story. But I saw someplace that I'm interested in moving. My kids don't have any lines there. My Jupiter is there. I've lived there before. It's very easy and expansive. My husband has a Uranus line. And it's funny because you're sort of thinking about your own destiny, so to speak, your own chart versus the practicalities of like, okay, this is my family. These are the people I live with. How would that play out for them? And was short of doing charts in synastry, like what would you advise clients to do if they feel very pulled to a certain place, but they're not sure if it's beneficial for their family? Like, does their beneficial result have a positive impact at all on their family members?
Well, that's how I would see it. And especially, when families are concerned. So my peers and I, we've been talking about this a lot recently. So I am of the view, and we are of the view, that, if the parents are happy, fulfilled, they have great jobs, money's coming in, that also opens travel opportunities, or, like being able to do certain hobbies, or, just like having a better lifestyle for the child. And of course, every situation is different. And again, the more people are in the mix, the more compromise will be needed. Because as you were saying, you might have a great line there. Your partner may not love living on the Uranus line, and it might be a great line for him depending on his goals and where it is in his chart and all that. So and again, the parents, the relocated charts and all that come into play. And if your child doesn't have a line there, again, he might have a Paran line that's with an orb, or his relocated chart might actually look really good or really supportive, and it shows maybe that he will make a lot of friends there, for example, or be a really good student or things like that. So again, there's so much to look at. There's also secondary technique called local space, which is something that, so it's like something that I include. Again, it's a secondary technique, but for this one, you definitely want to be on the lines or like under the lines, if that makes sense. We look at it from your birth chart, from your birth location, and essentially every person has like, say, a Venus line, a Mars line, so all the different planets, all the different lines, just going from your birthplace around the world. And if you say go under your Venus line, you could pull in those, or like you could feel those energies from the Venus line as well. And you can also use that, as I was saying earlier, say you want to maybe relocate within LA, you could take that, and the modern software, even the free software, allows you to do that, and essentially put that into like downtown LA and overlay this over LA and see, for example, where your Mars line is. I know a couple of people use, for example, their Mars lines to pick a gym where they can go so they have more energy and to keep going. So that's an idea. It's a fun thing to play around with. Again, for my purposes, we use it from birth location, but you can definitely use it in the city you are if you're looking for which neighborhood is maybe better for you or things like that. I've even heard of people using it within their house. So to feng shui different, to their rooms and furniture, and to see which room to use as their office and things like that. So there's lots of different use cases with that, but it's a secondary technique. And again, with those, it's like you want to be on the line to really feel the impact.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
And how it's amazing how sort of detailed and specific it can get if you really want to go deep.
Mhm,
Um, I want to bring it back for a second to zodiacal releasing. You touched on that
mhm,
earlier, and I guess I have two main questions around it. One, how does it how is it a part of, or how does it apply to astrocartography? And two, if it's sort of this concept of your life having predetermined rhythms, peaks and valleys,
mhm, mhm.
how does free will and volition fit into sort of a predestined philosophy in your mind?
Yeah, so zodiacal releasing is super fascinating. It's essentially shows your, yeah, as you were saying, valleys and peaks is the perfect way to describe it. You have a prep period, then you have a peak period, and then you have like a follow through period. So it comes in threes. There's more nuance to this based on your birth chart. Like, some peak periods can be more supportive, others more challenging. So it will depend on, looking at your exact birth chart and analyzing it and seeing what's going on. But it is really fascinating. I use it to track sort of, on a daily basis to see when will I have like a busier period in life. And there's different lots that we look at. There's a lot of spirit, which is more something that we would look at for career. Then there's a lot of fortune, which is more like for health and things that are maybe outside of your willpower. A lot of arrows, so for relationships, but not just like love relationships. It could be, the birth of a child could be coming through there. Something with your friends or coworkers could be coming through there. Sometimes we see that things come through both in a lot of spirit from like a career or mindset perspective, but then also they come through in a lot of arrows or fortune. So there's different things to look at, but it is really interesting to track. And just based on my personal experience, I'm always able to see when I will have busier periods, when I will be kind of like wrapping things up or starting things. And it's, I have it like kind of, on my computer. Obviously I keep track of it almost on a daily basis, but sometimes I'm not thinking about it and just like things just happen. I'm like, okay, that explains now what it was. This like, because there's also something called loosing of the bond, where essentially like a sequence is interrupted and there's like a change, if you will. And you see that happening, but you have no idea. You can definitely look back to the periods before that were in the same sign and try to see, but sometimes we don't track all these things. I personally don't keep a diary, like I journal, but I don't have a record of every single thing that happened every single day, like looking back many, many years. If you have that, that's obviously great. But you can also use this going forward. And I know a lot of people who use this, for example, to time when they should release their book. And obviously you can look at transits as well. And often you'll see this kind of like, they work in tandem, if you will. So you can use those techniques. You can also look at, lunar cycles, secondary progressions and all that. And kind of like the more you want to bring into it, the more you can kind of shed light on what might be going on and add more nuance. But just like looking at zodiacal releasing, especially because it's pre-written, and also just it's a great exercise. You can just go online and pull it up for free on like the usual sites, and just looking back, and we're looking at time frame. So sometimes people will be like, oh, August 20th, I don't know, 2000 doesn't mean anything to me, but it's usually a big chunk of time. There's different like sort of lots, sort of periods, if you will. Some of them are just days, some of them are months or years, so different chapters in our lives. And sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, that date doesn't mean anything, but we're actually looking at the period. And the more you dive into that, you'll be like, oh, okay, actually, I finished my degree then, or, I don't know, I got my first job, or I changed careers, or, I'm just giving you some examples. And then kind of you can like use that. I know it's a bit abstract the way I'm talking about it. Once you start pulling it up, it will make a bit more sense. There's obviously the different signs come into play, but it's a bit different than like natal natal astrology. So we're not necessarily saying because you have an Aries there, you'll have like Aries, flavor coming into play. It's a bit more nuanced than that. But yeah, it's a really interesting technique to dive into. I offer this like a report, but at the moment, but yeah, you can pull up your dates just on like one of the free sites, and then you can just like use that to keep track of what's going on, and then maybe start writing down certain dates to then see maybe in the future what could be occurring again.
What are your favorite sites to look at that through?
Yeah, so astro.com and astroseek.com are the two big sort of free sites. I don't know if both of them have Zodiacal releasing. I know one of them has. I personally obviously have professional software, so I don't reference those. So I know it's a bit trickier on those free sites. I use Astro Gold, which is what most astrologers use, at least those that work on Mac. It's also great. You can have it on your phone. They've also just added recently some great astrocartography features. But for astrocartography specifically, the professional software is SolarFire. Unfortunately, it's a Windows-based software, so you have to like work with some workarounds to use it on Mac, but it's fine. The downside is the software looks a bit like dated, but it's really the best. It's like the most detailed. You can zoom in to like every single city. It does cyclocartography, which is what I was referring to earlier. It's like the timing of astrocartography, where you have transits and secondary progressions in one.
Okay.
Astro Gold has this in a way, but not really the way it should be yet. They only recently started introducing astrocartography, obviously because it's so in demand. So maybe in the future they'll have more capabilities, but I do like to use a combination of both professional softwares because the Astro Gold has a great relocated chart tool, which allows you essentially to take your cursor and like move around the whole world map and see, what changes. While in SolarFire, you have to like type in the location and pull up a relocated chart for it. So I like to do my research with Astro Gold and then go back to SolarFire and then pull up the different relocated charts where applicable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I really love what you said. You said something about stories, like looking into this software, working with a, trained practitioner, how each place has a story. And I definitely had an experience one time years ago with an astrologer. This was an interesting thing. I have had so many astrology readings from like wonderful people that I'm so grateful to have had readings with. One in particular was great, but then stepping into the astrocartography, if that is maybe not one's area of expertise.
Yeah.
And I think it might have been Vedic, which is different from Hellenistic.
Oh, yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And this person said to me, like, oh, don't move there. Like, you'll get into a car crash or something and die. And I was like, wait, this seems like scary and aggressive. And I guess what I want to say to you is how you approach it is such a tonic to that, saying that there are different stories, different lessons in every place. And I kind of liken it to like repotting a plant, right? Like if you repot a plant, it's just going to grow kind of differently in different settings. I feel that way when I travel. And I guess I wonder along those lines, thinking of it that way, like if somebody comes to you, I know that you do a lot of business coaching and using this to help people grow their businesses. And in our culture, traditionally, it's like very linear, hustle, grind, words like that, work hard. And I think with astrocartography and with human design and the intersection of the two, it's such a beautiful way to work smarter and not harder, and to work in a way that is aligned and not to push yourself when you're in a place of not being in alignment. So if somebody's coming to you saying, hey, I'm hitting a wall, my business is just not growing, I'm trying everything, I guess like for a first timer, what is the first thing you say to them? Like, hey, let's get you on track. How are we going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it really depends, what have they already done and, how much do they know? Of course, if they have not looked into anything human design related or anything astrology related, I would definitely start there. Like look at their human design profile type, all those things. And that already can give you so many, ideas where there could be misalignment. And, and sometimes like, for example, manifesting generators, like I myself am one, we often hear like, you need you need,
Yay!
you need to niche down. And as you mentioned, the linear careers, of course, now it's a bit more, more flexible. And, when we were growing up, it wasn't just, just this like easy to, you kind of had to pick one thing and then stick to it and stay in a job for a while, and especially if you were like in corporate America.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, like, even just like finding out that it's okay to have multiple passions and not want to pursue a linear career because it doesn't align with you. And as I was saying, I'm like, I do so many different things, and I'm like able now to holistically bring them all together for my clients. And, depending on what they need, like, I'm definitely very passionate about technology, and, like AI is something that I use a lot. Even like, obviously, AI will never be able to replace an actual human astrologer or human design reader or astrocartographer, but it is definitely a way to work smarter in your business and kind of help you with mundane tasks. And yeah, I just like to like bring that all together, and kind of, some people just really need some like idea of like what is their actual like life purpose, and also when it comes to their careers, for example. I like to dive really deep into their charts. So like, how are they meant to make money? Like, are they meant to be more of service to clients? Are they meant to work more one-on-one with clients? Or are they meant to run a membership? Or, though everyone obviously is different, and their birth chart can give so much, so much nuance to that. And then also like with human design, for example, looking at incarnation crosses and really seeing like what is actually your purpose, where you're meant to be, once you like, have fully aligned all the other bits. So that can just give so many ideas. And, very often you'll see that people are just like focusing on different things because they thought they have to do one thing, but really it's not in alignment, or they were meant to like help people make more money, but they're, focusing on other things. So, or, they're not being of service. They're instead doing, I don't know, something like different. So it's really like there's so much already like, written for you in the stars, if you will, and just a blueprint. Also, if you're curious, you can go on my site, sandranelly.com, and pull up your human design body graph, and that will already give you a lot of information, as well as your birth chart if you want, in terms of astrology.
Human design is so cool, and it's given me an opportunity to like be more forgiving of different types of people. For
Yes.
example, like I'm a manifesting generator, just like you, so multiple interests, go, if something lights me up.
Exactly.
My partner is a projector, and I really I was like, what? Why are you resting? Why does anybody rest? But the projector, of course, needs to just rest and then look at systems. And it just makes, all of this work is very interesting because it makes, there's a liberation in it, I think. Like with the work that you do, the way that you are of service to people, it's a liberation for your clients and for all of us to say, oh, thank God, like somebody's naming the way I've always felt inside, and I don't have to work in this other way.
Exactly. And sometimes it's really just like, that validation and having that language for something. So, I mean, it's been the same for me. So when I really learned about human design, it was like, oh my goodness, okay, everything I knew and felt, and I would always follow my intuition, but obviously not everyone is as trained in following their intuition. And I was like, okay, this all makes sense now. And this is just the validation. And also you brought up the example earlier with like, there's a pull, there's a story left for you to unfold. So before I really knew astrocartography the way I know it now, I would sometimes, just get the urge to like travel somewhere. It was not necessarily a location that I've ever thought about, or I would just like see it briefly, like in a magazine. I would be like, I've never thought about this place, but I suddenly feel the urge to go there. And then, just like the way I roll, I would always like try to make it happen as quickly as possible. And I would just go. I did a lot of solo traveling back in the day. And and there were always like, experiences, stories left to unfold. And now that I know astrocartography, I obviously tracked it all back, looked at the lines, looked at, what's going on there, like did cyclocartography kind of backwards, looked at the dates, and tried to like piece it back together, like why did I want want to go there. And as I was saying, sometimes there's an explanation, and sometimes it's just like, the universe really like, wanting you to be there, placing you there, you to meet someone. That person then changes your life in a way or impacts you in a way that you then do something else. So, sometimes things are just meant to be, and they will also then just happen. So you can fight it, but, it's often, I always say, just follow your intuition and trust your intuition.
And what a beautiful example you are of that, because I think too, like we're programmed, many of us, not to, or we have a gut instinct that's crystal clear. And then we say, oh, let me superimpose some logic onto that and make a pro and con list. And I don't know about other people, I can't speak to that, but for myself, I've been in the habit in my youth, certainly, of thinking myself out of things. And the more I live, the older I get, the more I'm in tune with that gut instinct, not questioning it, but just saying, okay, let's do the next right thing. And your instinct will tell you that. And you might not know immediately the why, but if you just go through it, the why will become apparent.
Yeah, and like for me the same, like I meant to respond with my gut, but yeah, sometimes in life it was just, I would like make the decision that seemed more reasonable, or that, people around me would say is the most sensible, and, I thought with my head, and it just like, I then regret it further down the line because things, happened where I was like, okay, I felt in my gut that, 10 months ago I should have acted in a certain way, but I didn't, and now here we are, things are not as great. And if I had only listened to my intuition, things would have been different. So I definitely learned those lessons the hard way myself. And that just reinforced me to like, definitely always listen to my intuition and my gut in my case. But again, because I'm a manifesting generator, so obviously everyone in human design, again, if you want to look it up, you can go to my site. Everyone will have a different sort of like way to respond to things. But yeah, intuition is definitely something you should be listening to, and you can also practice that to like really get really good at that.
And I know I could talk to you forever, but before I let you go, I do want to ask you where are you most excited to travel this year, and why for yourself?
So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
funny that you say it. I literally just booked a week in London in the summer. I'm actually planning a bigger Euro trip. I have a big birthday this year, so
Oh, that's
so
exciting.
yeah. Yeah, so I will be meeting a bunch of friends, and I have family in Europe. So we'll be going to a bunch of different locations. So it will be like a longer trip. And yeah, so I booked like the first leg just before this call, and then I will move on to booking the rest probably over the weekend into the next week.
Really exciting. Um, and anything you would like to leave people with? Any other gem, a nugget of knowledge that I've forgotten to ask you about?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously so much.
There's so much.
Like, obviously, if you're relocating, because, that's obviously top of mind for a lot of people as well.
Yeah,
Obviously,
especially
if you
now.
can, exactly. If you can go and check out the location before you move, it's obviously great. I know that's not always possible, especially if we're talking about locations that are really far away. Because just coming back to the examples from earlier, the astrocartography may be great, but there's just something that doesn't fit. Like you don't like, I don't know, the people, or the access to public transit, or, getting to the airport is really tricky, or there's just something that doesn't work. In that sense, I would also mention that, it can take a while for all the energies really to be felt. So you might have maybe experienced that, some listeners maybe, that they traveled somewhere before, they had a great trip there, and then they moved to that location, and then after a while, it didn't feel as great, for example, because some planets and some energies can take a while to really manifest. But then also, with any move, and I've experienced this myself, obviously we as people change. We have transits, planets are constantly shifting. So, a location might be great for you for a certain time. And also, again, coming back to you're meant to be there. There's a story left to unfold for you. But a couple years down the line, it could just be that you're maybe bored of that location, even though it's maybe the best location you were able to find on your astrocartography map, or there's something, that just like, your goals have switched. So for example, you moved there because of, great career opportunities, but now you're looking to settle down and start a family and looking for that partner, and maybe that's not the location to look for that. So obviously, again, kind of compromise, being open-minded, and just like being mindful of those things is, also quite important.
Yeah. And probably, yeah. Wow. And it sounds like speaking to somebody like you would be also a good idea, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. Especially like if you're going to invest a lot of, money, or like, just like pick up and leave. And, so, everyone's situation is different.
Yes.
But if you can consult an expert and
right.
again, just like get as much knowledge as possible, that's always great.
Yeah. And just so that people can find you, your website and your Instagram and your Substack, which I'll list,
Yeah.
of course, but they are.
Yeah, so Sandra Nelly, NELLY.com, is where you can see all my offerings. I have lots of free offerings, and I do reports and readings and strategy sessions. You can, as I was saying, pull up your free human design charts and astrology birth charts. So feel free to check it out. Takeoff with astrology.substack.com is my Substack, and Astrology Ventures is my Instagram handle. But again, you can find all of that on my site.
Yes, I love it. I love your Substack.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. You've been writing
Likewise.
such interesting things lately.
Thank you.
So it's really nice. Truly, like everybody's processing these changes in our world and just the energies shifting in different ways. And I just personally, I find it very calming and grounding and clarifying to come to your work and just feel that there's knowledge and there are tools, and that you don't have to be sort of like flailing in the wind reacting to what's happening, that you can sort of ground yourself in a practice as we move forward. So thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
My pleasure.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. And yeah, I'm always here.
Amazing. It's such a delight talking to you, and thank you for all your knowledge, Sandra.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
You've been listening to Say More with Brooke Lyons. For more unfiltered conversations, head over to Substack. And if this one sparked something, send it to a friend. Thanks for listening.